Welcome to Coasting with Giants, a podcast all about the roller coaster enthusiast hobby and the people that are part of the community. Come along with me, Fab the theme park giant, as I interview some of my friends that I've met along the way in this crazy hobby. Hey there, Giant fans of fun. My name's Fab the theme park giant, and this is Coasting with Giants. Who am I? I'm a coaster and theme park enthusiast who used to work in the software industry. And about 2 years ago, I sold my house in Iowa. I quit my job and I moved to the Orlando, Florida area so I could pursue a career in content creation around theme parks and roller coasters. And this is my new show, Coasting with Giants, where I bring on my friends from the coaster community to talk about this crazy hobby that we're all a part of. Just so you know more about me, I've ridden 550 different roller coasters. We call those credits in the community. I've ridden coasters in, I believe, 13 different countries. I've been to over 100 something odd theme parks and amusement parks around the world. So I do consider myself pretty well traveled, although I have friends, as you'll find out, that make me look like I've never done anything in the coaster community because they're insane. So, luckily, we don't have one of those people this week. We've got one of my very, very good 2-week friends. A 2-week friend, by the way, is a term dubbed by one of my non-coaster friends back in Iowa a few years ago, that I used to go on these trips all the time for like 2 or 3 weeks with coaster friends. And he said that he was sick of me spending so much time with my 2-week friends and needed to hang out more with my year-round friends. So when you hear me refer to 2-week friends, that's what I'm talking about. So without further ado, let's bring on my good buddy and very good 2-week friend, Joe. How you doing, Joe?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man.
Thanks for
Absolutely.
having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So we're going to peel the curtain back just a little bit here. This is the first official episode of the podcast, only because we recorded this a week ago and I deleted all the files by accident when I was doing some other things. So we're going to try to make it sound natural like it was last time, but bear with us as we continue to work through the growing pains of the show. So, Joe, why don't you tell us a little about yourself? Who are you? Where do you live? What do you do? And we'll go from there.
So I'm from St. Louis. I work as a chef, and I've been a chef here in St. Louis for over 15 years now, cooking in all kinds of different kitchens and restaurants.
Yep. Yeah,
I've
you've
been
worked
in
your
the
way up since I've known you. You were just a lowly
yeah.
line cook back in the day. So
um, and I've always the been into roller coasters since I was a kid. Like we started like back in the day, the Travel Channel used to do these crazy roller coaster shows
yep.
about and it was also dubbed as the Coaster Wars of Magic
Oh
Mountain and
yeah.
Cedar Point.
I forgot about the
So that was
Coaster
always
Wars.
yeah. So that was always like those shows were always like what just always wanting to ride roller coasters, and like also grew up riding roller coasters from living in St. Louis. My grandpa worked for Anheuser-Busch his
Mm.
whole life. So then we would always get, as like for family vacations, he'd get us all free Busch Gardens and SeaWorld like passes or tickets that you could
Hmm.
use from like just from his job. So then that was always like going to Williamsburg or Tampa. That was always part of like growing up and like being able to or wanting to ride these big roller coasters. Luckily I got to ride Big Bad Wolf,
Mm.
which is always like a one that I'm very excited. Like I was like 6 years old riding that. It was like this
But
is
one of those lost credits for me. I never got to Williamsburg until the year after Big Bad Wolf closed, unfortunately.
And then also adding on to like the Busch Gardens talk, like of like roller coasters. Scorpion at Tampa
Uh,
is my was my first roller
Looper.
coaster upside my first upside down
Yep.
looping roller coaster. Also, like being like a kid, like being young and like 7 or whatever was like this was that like and just a lap bar that like that this was
Right.
I was that young being able to like you could ride a looping roller coaster and it
And
was only like
and
42 inches
sadly,
I think or a little less.
and we're talking about lost rides. Scorpion just closed a
Yeah,
few months
R.I.P.
ago, and man, I was there just a few weeks ago, and they haven't even done anything. It's still just standing there, and I'm
Also
so
got my Cedar
so
Point
sad to see it.
coffee
Oh yeah, I
mug.
got your Cedar Point mug there. I want to go back
Oh,
to the coaster shows for a second because like I think that's something lost on the current generation, just with the
yeah.
internet and YouTube and things of like back in the 90s and early 2000s and things like that. Like it was hard to get info even on the internet. I was part of the news groups back in the day, like Roller Coaster, if you even know what that is. But this is pre-web
My
stuff. Like,
mine was West Coaster. That's the one I always
oh
went
yeah,
on.
yeah, yep. Well, West Coaster was an actual website. Roller Coaster was a news group forum, which is like an old
Oh,
bulletin board thing that was just text. So like I'm talking, I used to read this in the early '90s, like when I first got AOL and figured out how I could FTP to places and find things, like because I'm a nerd at heart. But like, yeah, I used to read Wrecked Out Roller Coaster way back in the day. Man, that's 30 years ago now. But so these shows would come out, and it was always Memorial Day weekend, and it used to be I think Discovery used to do them, and then it transitioned to like the Travel Channel eventually. But it was always Thrills, Chills, and Spills, like the
uh huh.
whole weekend, the whole 3 day Memorial weekend, all show like from like 5 o'clock to like 11 p.m. Just all coaster shows those 3 days, and we'd sit and watch them. We'd record them, so we had them like. But this was a way
Yeah,
you found out about new rides coming out at different parks. Like you'd see parks you'd never heard of. Like I was obsessed with Busch Gardens Williamsburg because they did so much at that park back in the day. Like it was always my bucket list park, to finally go to. But yeah, I think with YouTube and things like that and TikTok, it's just so easy. I can go just look for roller coasters and you're going to find out about
yeah.
anything out there in seconds if you want to.
And then
R
after you
RCDB, the
search for it,
website, like just think of how convenient that is for nerds like
yeah.
us. So
You also like, and it's like you search like I don't know one Goliath or something, one roller coaster on YouTube, and then next thing you know, you the next day you
right.
open YouTube, it's just filled with roller coasters.
Well, and you get done with one, it's going to serve up another coaster video, probably from that channel. You click on that. It's easy. Those YouTube rabbit holes. It's real easy to go down. But it's just such a nice, way more convenient thing for the hobby than having to wait till May, 30th every year to see what
This is a weird
new
that
rides
I
are
can't
coming
believe
out.
like a weird thing that I just thought about that I remember, like when we were in one time I don't know what grade I was in, but like when we were in school, there was like some project we had to do where you like cut things out of a magazine and then you
Oh,
like what you like you had to
a
find like in the
collage.
magazine.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was like there was some random like it was for sure like a boomerang or like a Vekoma train
Hmm.
that like I put like that on liking roller coasters. Just like even just little things like
And,
that, early days of like
oh yeah, I remember. I mean, I'm old enough to remember like 1989, just to date myself here. But in the library,
you're old.
I used to go look in the spring for like Popular Mechanics or
Uh huh.
engineering
Yeah.
type magazines at the school library, even in grade school, because like I remember want to say it was Popular Mechanics. It may not have been, but like they announced Magnum XL200 at Cedar Point, that this 200-foot tall roller coaster was opening, and I just remember being like, 200 feet tall, like, and now that's so
Yeah.
crazy.
Now it's like
Like with
that's just the norm.
200, like I was at SeaWorld yesterday. I rode Mako like 6 times in a row without getting off. That's 200 feet. Like it's not a big deal
Yeah.
anymore. But man, back in the day, that
Yeah.
was a huge deal. And yeah, just finding that
Oh,
info is so much easier now. But so more about the hobby, like one of the things with this show I want to touch on is just the intricacies, and even within the coaster nerddom world, that there's like different levels of it. So yes, I've
mhm.
been on 550 roller coasters. I'm an absolute lunatic when you talk to normal people and I tell them something like that,
Yeah, they're
their
uh-huh.
heads
And then they'll be like,
explode.
"Wait, is that individual or
Yes,
you've ridden that
the
one?"
question is always, are those different, or is that how many rides you've done on just all the, like, I've calculated that out, and there are people that do that. But
Yeah.
I mean, I've been on 25,000. Who even knows how many cycles of roller coasters I've been on, especially since I moved down here now and can just go do ride things whenever I want.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, that's always the first question from non-coaster people for some reason. Like, so I always say I've been on 550 different roller coasters just to get out
Oh,
ahead of it.
and then I guess I oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I guess I didn't well, and then like so I've lived in St. Louis my whole life, so Six Flags St. Louis is my home park where I've ridden like like we all kind of got to start somewhere of
Yep.
like where
Yep.
like what we have. So, but that's always been my home park, and like I will always like go there once a year. It's like Batman is always the first roller coaster I go ride. It's you go right,
It's hard to
Batman's
argue it.
right there.
I mean, Batman is just there's no
Classic.
better clone ride ever made. I mean, like
Yeah.
Batman's always good. So that's always a good way to start the year off for it's funny now, like I don't have a coaster year anymore. Like I used to always think of that living in the Midwest, that like, okay, April, like let's get going. And now
Yeah.
I just have a coaster year all the time. So um yeah, so with all the different levels of the hobby, like, so Joe and I, even though, oh, so what's your count, Joe? What's your current count?
Uh, so technically, my personal count is 513 roller coasters, and then what we use Coaster Dash count shout out.
Yep.
On the strict count, it's 509, but
Okay.
I count water coasters, so
Yep.
that's what some
So
people don't.
uh,
There's certain things that
I'll
people don't
always I'll
count.
always try to explain these terms and things that we're using, but Coaster Dash Count is kind of the official Coaster Nerd website for tracking your credits. And the guy that runs it is essentially the arbiter and decides what is an actual credit and what is it, to the point where he'll actually take credits away like years after they've been open because he just decides, and like we all just kind of go with it. It's weird, but so when Joe mentioned strict count, that is that guy's like formal like rule. So when he posts the rankings of who has the most credits and things like that, it goes off of his strict count. And the strict count will weed out certain types of roller coasters. So like Joe said, he counts water coasters. I do also. It's a roller coaster. There's roller coaster track. It runs on gravity. Just because you end up in water doesn't mean it's not a roller
Yeah.
coaster to me. Like, so I don't understand. I've never understood that one. But and there's a couple others on there, but like butterfly coasters are one of them. Those are things in Europe you'll see where it's literally just, it looks like a seesaw almost that you ride in.
I
They're
feel like
hard
I
to
would count
describe.
that. I've never ridden one.
I don't know why it wouldn't. It's
Yeah.
all like I, and then like a skateboarder counts, the Intamin skateboards that launch and do the same thing.
Hmm.
Like it's weird to me, but yeah. So there's all these different levels. Joe and I are fairly normal people, uh, even to like outsiders, I guess. But like some of our friends, so like Joe will ride a kiddie coaster. He has no shame with that stuff. Where like I have rules around what I will ride and what I will not. My standing rule is if it's bigger than Grover at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, I will ride it. That's like 26 and a half feet tall of a cone. That's not a Vekoma roller skater, actually. Now that I think about it, it's a different company that made Grover, but they're essentially the same height. So that's kind of my cutoff. Whereas like people will ride like a 5 foot tall thing at a pizza place at a strip mall in like Richmond, Virginia or something. Yeah, Joe will
I've
do
done
that.
it. I do it.
I don't do that stuff. We have friends that will drive like 6 hours out of their way just to get that one credit. They're lunatics. You'll
That
meet
that one
you'll
I'm
meet
not.
some of those
That one I
people on
don't
this
do.
show. So,
Yeah.
but we have
I
our
guess the
limits. I know I'm crazier than most, to do like a 3.5 week trip in Europe where it's mostly focused on roller coasters. Like that's pretty crazy. But I also mix culture in. I also like want to see Europe while I'm over there. It's not all coaster based where some people like, I mean, they're only going to some of these places because there's roller coasters there and they aren't looking at anything besides that roller coaster. So there's the first episode of this show, you're not going to get into the super intricacies of some of these, but like later on, Rick Matthews, we'll get into some of my friends who are actually in like the top 10 for credits like written on that coaster dash
in the
count site.
world,
Yeah, I know 3
they're
people I think in the
famous.
top 10. So, and I know 2 of them are coming on the show at some point. So, all right. That's a nice little introduction. We brought Joe in. We've introduced the show. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll get more down into the details of Joe and his coaster hobby uh, fandom, I guess. I don't know. I didn't end that segment very well, but let's take a break. And welcome back to Coasting with Giants. I'm Thad, the theme park giant. This is my friend Joe. He is also a coaster nerd like me, and we're chatting about his experience in the hobby throughout his life. So, Joe, let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about some of your all-time of those 513 coasters you've been on. Tell me some of your favorites and like what parks they're at and just why you love them so much.
So I will always talk about like Maverick has always been like that was
That's Cedar Point.
my baby, my Cedar Point. Yeah, Cedar Point. Like it does everything that like you can ask for. It goes upside down. It's fast. It launches you
I like that you
like
listed
quick.
upside down first when that's usually the last thing coaster nerds actually care about.
Well, it does all of the things
Right.
that you want it to do.
Sure.
Um, quick turns, like it's real like snappy.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Insane
like
airtime.
so
Like
yeah, and
insane
then like
airtime for a ride that has inversions. Like I will
yeah,
say.
and then like years ago when we went on a trip, um, we had ERT
Mm. Let's
on
explain what
Maverick.
let's
So
explain what ERT is here. So
yeah, yeah. So
ERT. Sorry, there's all these terms you're gonna get, but first of all, airtime. Let's go back a step. 'Cause I'm assuming there might be people that have no idea what we're talking about on this show. But airtime is those negative G's. So when you're on a ride and it does one of those like kind of parabola type things, you will feel that weightlessness that like astronauts feel when they're in space. So you get that negative G. So a G, if you're not a super smart scientist like Joe and I, uh, is basically a 0 G's is what you are, your weight, and on Earth. When you get positive G's, so like if you're flying down a ride and it goes into a tight corner or something, you're going to feel that like force. It could be like 2 or 3 G's. So you'll feel 3 times heavier. But the negative G's, you're actually lifted up like out of your seat, like you get this floating feeling or intense, depending on the company or ride. But so airtime is that's kind of the what we're looking for on most rides, I would say. I think most coaster nerds want those
I think
negative
so.
G's. You know,
The ejector air
yeah,
time.
you want
You
that
don't want the
ejector
float.
air.
You don't want the floating. You want the ejector air.
Yep. I mean, I still love floaty air. We got Mako down here
Yeah,
in
it's cool.
Orlando, but like, I mean, you also have Gwazi sitting there in Tampa,
Hmm.
ready to blast your thighs. But so yeah, just quick explanation on that, and then ERT. So Joe and I used to do these tours. That's how we met. Theme Park Review was the website, the coaster club we were a part of many years ago. But we would do these tours with them, and when we'd go to parks, we would, as a group of 50 or 100 nerds on these tours, they would either like open a ride an hour early before the park would open or stay open an hour or two late and just let our group ride like their biggest ride or rides, even just depending on the park. But so what Joe's referring to at Cedar Point on his first tour he ever did, they had like a 2 hour session on Maverick to end the night. So yeah, that's what he's talking about when he says ERT. All right, back to Maverick.
So, well, we had Maverick, so we had the ERT, and they had all like Maverick has like at least 4 or more trains.
Mm-hmm.
So like they had all the trains running, even for like it was a big group, but still for how many people we had, it wasn't like everybody. I basically sat in the front right seat for an hour straight, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't leave that seat, and it was just so Maverick will always be my like. It's not it technically it's not my number one anymore if like I count that, but like then Steel Vengeance came, RMC came around, and Steel Vengeance is there it is up there of like
It's my number
probably
one.
number one. Yeah, number one, like in most intense. Like it's a beast.
I
Um
I love Steel Vengeance. I can only ride it 4, 5 times a day, maybe. Because I mean, I'm 6'5", I'm about 270 pounds. I'm a big guy, so like, and RMC's restraints are not exactly the most ideal for a guy. They're probably one of the worst for big people, but the amount of pain that ride puts my thighs through when I ride it, and it's worth it to me. But I can't ride that thing 25 times a day like I can
it has
most things.
that guard, right? Isn't
What's that?
that does that like shin for your like that it's like that bar
No,
where your
that
shin.
that's better. They fixed those. So back in the day when Outlaw Run first opened, so
Okay.
they had they had a metal bar that went across your shins, and most people it didn't matter because your legs aren't like long enough and whatever. But the way their trains are, I have size 15 feet on top of being giant, so my feet can't even lay flat in their trains the way their floors are set up. So I
Oh.
have to like have my feet up, so that already creates an issue. So my shins were
Even
like pressed up into it. And I rode Outlaw Run twice during an ERT session, and I thought it was going to break my shins. I actually haven't. I'll have to find the picture maybe and post it, but I had an indentation in my shins that was like a half inch, like deep,
oh,
to where, like, I'm not. I the second time I rode it, I actually thought I broke my shin. Like it hurt that bad when we were on the brake run, and I didn't ride it again. Now they have these molded, like
yeah.
soft. It's a little harder plastic, but they're much more comfortable. They're still not ideal, but it's a lot better than having a steel bar shoved into your shin.
I just can't remember because I know it affects you more. Like I'm
Yeah,
5'5",
right.
so like
I'm a foot taller
even
than you.
then though,
You
like
don't deal with some
yeah,
of the issues that I do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Even though being in those trains though, it's like you feel like you're like stuck. Like it's
Yep.
they're not they're terrible.
I mean, I get it. RMC is doing things no one is doing. They're the most intense. I mean, it's not even
Yeah.
close. I mean, Intamin gets intense. They're the only ones I think that get close. Like I can't think of anybody. I've heard the newer Vacomas are really good. I just haven't been to Europe in a few years. But RMC is just, I don't know how they do it,
Yeah.
because those things, they don't run out of steam either. Like they're, it doesn't matter that an RMC could be 5 miles long and you'd come barreling into the brake run at like 80 miles an hour. Like I don't know how they do it. The
Yeah.
rides just keep their speed. They're so intense. But so yeah, sorry I cut you off there. But Outlaw
That's
Run
all right.
we were talking about there. Oh, we were talking about Steel
I mean,
Vengeance
all
actually.
we talking Steel Vengeance, but also like I was going to talk about Outlaw Run anyways. Like we're talking steel coasters, but
Mm-hmm.
RMCs like so Outlaw and like also like being a Missourian, Outlaw Run is like it's my favorite wooden roller coaster. Then I'd say El Toro,
Mm.
but like Outlaw Run's like that's my baby. Of like we're like it's the perfect like 1-2 punch where you're just like all of a sudden like just like and it's just
It
over. It's like what just
well,
happened? That was
because
awesome.
Outlaw Run's not very big, compared to a
No,
lot of the more intense RMCs. Actually, I think their mid-size ones are crazy intense, like
yeah,
Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion, the Wildcats
I
Revenge at
haven't.
Hershey Park that opened a couple years ago. I think is fantastic. Like I kind of like some of the like 100-foot tall ones they do because they're just kick ass. But
The only
and
ones of those that I've ridden is I think it's Twisted Cyclone is what it's called. The
oh,
one that's at
in New
Six Flags
England,
New
yeah,
England.
yep.
Yeah,
And I've heard
it
that
was.
one's
I
good.
thought it was.
Yeah.
It was good. It just I was kind of rainy that day, or just seemed
Mm.
like. But the more it gets the into the day, it feels like it kind of gets better and better. So like that like early compared
That
to that first ride I had to the last ride I had was like, oh, this is completely different.
Yep. So RMC is Rocky Mountain Construction. Uh, they've been around. It's about 15 years now. I want to say like New Texas Giant was probably around 2010, but they a bunch of guys that worked for other companies kind of broke off and started their own. But what they became known for is taking these really big wooden coasters that had kind of reached the end of their life, where they were so rough and unrideable that most of the people that would go to the parks wouldn't go near them. And New Texas Giant was one of those, like, and our Texas Giant, the original Texas Giant. And so RMC came in, they reused the wood foundation, um, but build steel track on top of it. And they're doing, I mean, they do inversions, they do just some of the craziest things you've ever seen on a roller coaster. No one else is doing the stuff they do, like the wave turns and things like that. I mean, some of them are just nuts, but that's what they became known for, is coming in and fixing up your old wooden coasters. And then what happened? They were popular for a couple years there, and then Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri, came to them and said, "We want a wooden coaster," and they built. A lot of people have it as their number one, Joe included. I mean, it's now that I've been on it since they fixed the restraints, it's in my top five wood, no doubt. But it is, that thing just hauls ass, and I mean it doesn't stop for how small it is.
I mean, it's gotten a little rougher. I wrote it in October.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the most recent when I wrote it, and I feel like it was kind of cold, but still, it's like
I mean,
wow.
still though, like
And it's like also it's
RMC
like
rough is nothing compared to like
yeah,
an old.
exactly. It's a cool and the cool like how the setting is. It's just
Mm-hmm.
you take that little left turn before you drop, and then you get like that full Ozark Mountain view.
Yep.
It's a cool. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's that park's just so cool because it's literally built on top of one of like the mountains in the Ozarks, the mountains.
Yeah,
I mean, they're more foothills, but the views in that park, like on top of Outlaw Run, Wildfire, I think is perhaps one of the most, maybe in the U.S. it might be the most scenic roller coaster like
yeah,
setting. I
for
mean,
sure.
it's tough to beat like that. That park is beautiful, and just the last 20 years or so they've really expanded to become this amazing thrill ride park on top of this awesome family park. Like Silver Dollar City is always going to be one of my favorite parks. One thing I
Yeah,
miss about the
and I
Midwest was how easy it was to go to Silver Dollar City because it's not an easy
and
place
I
to get to when you don't live there.
right, and I much prefer Silver Dollar City to Dollywood.
Yep. Yeah. So they're
Yeah,
sister
like
parks, both owned by Hershend, but I'm in the same boat as you. I much prefer Silver Dollar City. I've only been to Dollywood once. I really liked it, but yeah, I just like everything about Silver Dollar City a little more.
Silver Dollar
Uh,
City still feels like it has that like you're surrounded in trees. The new area that they built in Dollywood, it just like there's not it's just big it's just a big concrete land and there's no trees at all.
yeah, they
And
wiped
like that
out
was
like a
used to
ton of
be
trees to put that in.
yeah, and that used to be like their whole thing was like, oh, we're in the Smoky Mountains and
Right.
blah blah blah. It's like I don't feel like I'm in the Smoky Mountains at all now from
Yeah.
being in, but
And I
whatever.
haven't been there since 2012 when we did our first tour together, but just what I've seen, Gatlinburg, that whole area is just so over,
Yeah,
I
it's
guess, developed at this point that I do think it's going to lose its charm. And I wonder, because like Silver Dollar City's building that new resort and things like that, like, are they going down that same road? But
yeah,
they're still so far out there compared to where the rest of Branson
I know.
is. I mean, we've got
That's the funny thing. Yeah,
in
it's like
our
you have to go.
lifetime, it's not going to get
You have a
over.
big.
Oh, it's a windy, long road through some
Yeah,
like
it's like
it's
the Branson
strange.
strips. So the Branson strips over here, and then you got to like go to Silver Dollar City. It's like
It's 15-20 minutes from the where Branson is. I mean, and it's all uphill to get there. I mean, it's one of the it's a cool drive though. I mean, I love like driving into Branson.
oh
But
yeah, it's going there in like the fall is so awesome.
oh yeah, I bet. I've only done spring or summer, so but fall with the leaves turning would be really awesome, I bet. All right. So I think we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we're gonna talk more about like your favorite parks, some of the your favorite trips you've done, and some trips that you're looking forward to maybe this summer, Joe. So, all right, stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Coasting with Giants. It's Thad the Theme Park Giant here with my buddy Joe. We've been talking about all of his favorite things about the coaster hobby. Uh, Talked about some of your favorite rides. Let's get into some of your favorite parks you've been to, and then from there we can talk more about like favorite trips you've done in the past or like tours since we used to do those, and maybe get into some of the trips you're looking forward to in the upcoming coaster season. So, what's your some of your favorite parks, Joe?
So I mean, we talked about it earlier, but like I'd say of like American parks, like Busch Gardens, Williamsburg is like probably my favorite of just like or just it's beautiful. Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
on that like perched on that hill and like in that like ravine, like
Yeah,
the
the
setting
ravine
of
and the
it.
valley, the river like running through it. It's just unlike
It
there's no other
it's a
American
crazy
park
park
quite
that
like that.
you have to walk. I mean, it's one of those parks like walking it kind of sucks, but
Yeah.
like you're also like, dude, we're
Well,
like in like the forest right now, and then also just those just the lineup and like back when I was younger, like Alpengeist was
mm,
always like that was a bucket list roller coaster for me.
mm-hmm,
So like, because it's like when we would go as a family, I wasn't tall enough to be able to. So like seeing that ride
mm-hmm.
always like being a little kid was like, oh, it looks like it's 800 feet tall
Yep.
going down and like being like a kid. So
Well, that
Busch
is the
Gardens, Williamsburg.
Alpengeist is the biggest invert, right?
Yeah, it's
I
that
think it's that or
that
It's bigger
when
than
it goes
Montu,
down
right?
in uh-huh.
Yeah.
When it
So
goes down, Montu's better, but
agreed. Agreed.
when
Put
it goes down
Montu in
in that
that
ravine,
setting, and whew,
oh yeah.
now you're talking. But so Alpengeist, for those that don't know, it's an inverted coaster, which They hang under the track. It kind of looks like a ski lift and plays very well on Alpengeist because Alpengeist is themed to like a Swiss uh, ski resort. And like the lift hill, like actually has, they look like chairlift, like the towers that they use for the chairlifts. So
Yeah,
just,
that's always like a cool little detail because that's not like a normal B
yeah,
and M
that's the
support.
only themed supports I think I've ever seen on a B&M invert, but it's super
Yeah.
awesome. But yeah, it opened in like the late 90s, but this was one of those that when we talked about those shows earlier, every Memorial Day, Alpengeist was always like a featured ride,
Mhm.
to the point where I kind of forget about this now, but that was probably my number one bucket list roller coaster for 15 years till I rode it in 2012. Like I just, because I always love inverts. Like Raptor was, I loved it for years. Montu's in my top 10 steel. Like I love Montu, but like, man, I wanted to ride Alpengeist so bad. And now I've been there so many times, but like, uh, you were talking about that park, like you're constantly walking up and down. Like there's no,
Yeah.
you're in valleys. They have rides down at the base of the valley. So like the thing with that park, I've probably been there 5 or 6 times now, but no park confuses me more when I'm in it
I
than
I
Busch
totally
Gardens
agree.
Williamsburg. I am so, until probably my last trip, because it was like so dead that day and I just had a chance to like, I wasn't rushing around trying to do everything. I actually had time to just take the park in and it was like, oh, I finally understand how this is set up. But
Yeah.
for years I'd walk around there so confused. And like I went with Jeremiah and Nicole, the one time, and they're
Mhm.
locals. And Jeremiah was like making fun of me. He's like, it's like two circles connected. And I'm like, but it doesn't seem like it. I don't know. And I think part of that too, though, the first time we ever went was 2012 on our new hotness tour with
Mhm.
TPR. And when we came into the park, we came in some like side entrance and we were in like Ireland, or like I remember we came in by where the
Oh,
wolves are. And
yeah.
so that was like my point of reference for what the entrance was. I didn't even see the main entrance that day till we left at the end of the night
'Cause
to walk through like by
yeah,
the
the main entrance
Shakespeare
is
like
like that
globe.
bridge.
Yeah, never saw any of that. Like spent like 15 hours in that park and I never even saw the front like entrance area, like because we were just, yeah, sorry, that was a long rant about how confusing that park is, but it's a tiring park, it's a confusing park, like, but it is an awesome
Oh,
park. It's well
that
worth
part
all the other
and I
headaches of logistics, but
and that was like bucket list park for me, or like being able to go to that park like years later as
mm-hmm.
like being older and I can ride all the rides.
Yep.
We went on that first trip that I went on, the TPR trip, the road to Cedar Point before I met you, which was like that trip was for me. I've been to Cedar Point before, but all these other parks I've never been. Like we went to Six Flags Great Adventure,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, went to Williamsburg. Already been there, but also like I haven't ridden like the rides that I could ride. Um,
Well, and there's a difference
like
going
we
to
did
a park.
Kennywood.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what else. There was. I mean, dude, it was just all like big park after
Right.
big park after big park, and it was like this
Those.
was the because it was like these are all of these like being on watching those shows when I was in like sixth
Yep.
grade. Ten come like 10 years later, I finally get to like be in a like older and like an adult in my 20s, and I finally get to like ride these rides that I've
Yep.
always dreamt about riding.
And there's a difference between going to a park for the first time on your own with just friends and going on like a tour like that, because
Yeah.
I mean they roll out the red carpet at like all those
Uh
parks,
huh.
and I mean it's such an experience. And like you said, so your first tour was that road to Cedar Point. My first one was 2012. I did the new hotness tour, and the main reason was, like you, I'd been to a lot of the Midwestern parks, major ones. I grew up 3 hours
Hmm.
from Six Flags Great America in Chicago. That was my home park before I moved to Des Moines, and Adventureland was my home park. But so I'd been to Cedar Point. I'd hit some of the big ones, but when the list came out and it was like Great Adventure, Coney Island, um, I love New York City to begin with anyway. But
Oh,
like Busch
Knoebels, Hershey Park,
Gardens,
that was on there.
Knoebels, Hershey, Carowinds, Six Flags Over Georgia, Dollywood. And it was like
Yeah.
I hadn't been to any of those parks, and they were all like bangers for me.
Uh huh.
And that year, like a lot of those parks were putting in big time rides. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, that's why it was the new hotness tour, but like Sky Rush
Yeah.
at
That.
Hershey.
Yeah. Sky Rush is when
Um,
they. That was when Hershey built Sky Rush. That was
yep,
why that was on there.
yep. And then, God, I know there were other big rides on that trip. I can't think of them. A Wild Eagle was at Dollywood, I remember.
Oh yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's so like you,
Verbolten was Busch Gardens.
yeah, that's right. Because Big Bad Wolf got taken out the year before for Verbolten, and I got to ride Verbolten, but not Big Bad Wolf. So yeah, you see these trips, and it's just like I feel like that's everyone's first like foray into it. It's finally that trip you've always wanted to do, and like someone's gonna do it, and you're like, okay, I'm in. And
Yeah.
then
And it was like
and then
easy
that
too.
just
This
ups
was
that
also
coaster nerddom to a new level once you start doing
it
that stuff.
definitely was like a big deal for me too because I also went on this. This was the first ever trip I did. I went on, and then we were on like a big bus tour, but like I was like 21. I've never done a trip like by myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
I went not knowing a single person, and then you do these trips now like this is how we met. Like we've
Right.
never I would there's like lifelong friends that I met from these trips. That was like
Yeah, I
such a
mean,
cool thing that I'm glad I like I just was like, you know what? I'm gonna do this.
well, like this summer, I mean, the 13 years I've known you now, and I mean,
Yeah.
and
It's
just think
crazy.
of
Like
all the
I'm
people from that new
35 and
hotness
you met
tour, like that I'm really good friends with, and I mean,
yeah,
the
like
list is
I'm
very long.
35 now and like you met me I was 20, 21, 22.
Yep.
And it's funny because it was Busch Gardens at Williamsburg was the that was probably the first time we actually met because you were wearing like you had your Vikings gear on,
Yep.
and I started, and then I think we had the like Midwestern
Well,
bond
I'd
because
started
like
to
I'm St.
talk.
Louis, you Iowa.
I started to talk to Priscilla and Steve at King's Dominion a little bit, like the day before, and I think that's why I kind of got absorbed into your group at Busch Gardens because I was like Russ and Stacy, like when we all kind of hung out that day. I remember like a bigger group of like 8, but because the problem with those is you get the Q bots, and you have to be like in a
Yeah,
group of 4 at a lot of places. Bush was nice because we could just be in a bigger group, and I think maybe we did the backstage tour together, and that's how like our groups got hanging out
yeah.
that
Or
day.
we're
But
just like
I,
it was
I always remember you
early morning. We're just
you passed out from exhaustion at the what's the Oktoberfest.
the
Um,
yeah the like the big beer hall
yeah, there's a huge like
the
Oktoberfest beer.
hospitality house.
Yes, at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, where I mean, there's 100 tables in there, like, and they'll have like an oompa band land. I mean, we were just getting run into the ground on this tour, and like you'd already done a tour before that, so
Yeah,
like,
we were already on a week and a half before,
yep,
like already still like we were up in Canada, all in New York,
yep,
and
yeah, because
then
you
we
guys you
joined
guys
your.
did that Leviathan trip
So like
first.
it to me that day and I already been to Busch Gardens the year before, so it was kind of like I wasn't like that, but it fully hit me that day when we were at that. Like I literally just fell asleep in the middle of the hospitality
Yeah,
house.
so we all got up and left Joe and sat like 50 feet away at a different table and just let him sleep. And the best part was like it was busy enough where families like would sit down at the same table as Joe because there was no room, and like eat while he was just sleeping with his head on the table. And we eventually he woke up and just no one was at the table with him. To watch your confusion as you realize
Oh, it was
like
like,
everybody left
where?
me. I don't know where anyone is. You probably didn't have anyone's phone number or anything at that time because I mean we weren't like exchanging info at that point yet. But like yeah, it was. That's one of my favorite Joe memories. Just you completely passed out at that table, and I was just leaving you. So, good times. Um, all right. So Bush. I know you love Cedar Point. Any any international parks that you're a big fan of?
Oh, probably Leesburg in
Oh, yeah,
Sweden.
yeah. Gothenburg,
That's like,
Sweden.
I would just say of like, that was one of the coolest days at a park. And then
I think
of
that's
like,
my favorite
and
day
like
I've ever
that
had at a
that
park.
day, and then we Tivoli Gardens also
Mm.
in that realm of like European parks that they're like I don't even know how to like it's not even anything you could
So
compare. Like you
so
can't compare
and
any
Tivoli.
European park to an American park.
No, Knoebels is the only, and Knoebels is different. So like, so
Knoebels is kind of like a
Tivoli is in Copenhagen, Denmark,
Copenhagen.
and it is dead center of the city.
Yeah,
Uh, Liseberg
it's
is
crazy. It's cool.
somewhat similar. It's not quite like dead center, but it's in the city. Like, and both parks, I believe they're free admission. I could be wrong on
I
that.
think so.
I don't think
Or
Liseberg is anymore, but I'm pretty sure Tivoli was a free admission and pay to ride. Actually, no, that's how Liseberg is. There's no admission. You pay for like the ride bracelet. But that's the way a lot of European parks are. And
yeah,
they're hard to describe if you're from America and haven't been to them, but it's like it's a part of the city. And on a weekend, on a Friday night, people just go hang out and there'll be free entertainment. Like Liseberg has a big like grandstand where the day we were there with TPR, I remember there was like a 20-piece like band
yeah.
playing, and it was all like senior citizens like dancing with each other, like just old school like you'd see in the
And it's
50s.
they have
um
it set up too where like there's like the little boost to it. Feels like almost
mhm.
like it's like a like what you could think like a festival would be
Yes,
or something. But that's just
it's
every
like a
day.
combination of a really good amusement park, a city park, and like a fair or
If you took
like a
like parts of
festival. Yeah.
if you like took like parts of like Epcot and then like
Yep.
added added not like the Disney rides but added
Hmm.
like major roller coasters
Yeah.
in there,
Yep.
it would be like something like
That's a
that.
good comparison
You
because
you
everyone
take the
has something you can do. Like
yeah, you take
old, young. Yep.
the food parts of Epcot, like the music or something,
Yep.
add some major rides.
Yep.
Dude, it's so cool. And like
Well,
even with Tivoli
and then
Garden
it's
and like
built on
being
this giant hill that they actually have escalators to like take you to the top, like
yeah.
because it's such a giant hill, and then they use that to build these amazing roller coasters. So they use that terrain. Like, yeah, that park
Yeah,
is
that like
just next level. I love.
so
That's probably
that
my
year we
second
went
favorite
was
European park. I love
yeah,
Liseberg. Yeah.
Leesburg. So that was the year that we went Helix debuted.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
like that's probably up there of like if you could say in my top 5 or whatever
Yeah,
because
I
it's
love
just like
Helix.
I mean, it's one of those crazy rides where like I've never ridden anything like that. And
Yeah.
it also the way that it's set on the mountain, you're like,
Yep.
this thing is incredible.
It's the one of the strangest layouts like you'll ever see for a coaster. It starts at the highest point. The station is the highest point of the ride.
Yeah.
That may not be true. You probably get launched pretty high, but you drop out of it right into an inversion and then get like
Hmm.
launched, like, and you're just flying around the hill, like, and it is. and we had I think 2 hours that night on it. But that's one of my favorite ERT sessions ever. And then you have to understand the setting of that station with
Oh,
that
it's
song. It has the
that
best
music playing.
song on any roller coaster, and I mean it's like a dance party. It's like a rave in that, and like I remember
Yeah.
I downloaded that song. I used to listen to it like after we got back, but that thing just blasted for two
Mhm.
hours. You know, we'd been drinking that day, some other things
Oh
maybe,
yeah.
but like I mean we were
Yeah.
feeling good that day, and that I honestly do think that day was probably my favorite day ever at a park. It
That,
was
and then it's
incredible.
also, it's like, and then Boulder's there on the other
Yeah,
side of the park.
yeah.
Like,
Boulder, just one of the greatest wooden roller coasters on the planet.
dude,
And like we're
like
not even, yeah, and
and
we don't
then
even think about it. Like,
and now I haven't been there since, but they now there's a dive machine, like a B and
yep,
M dive machine on that hill as well,
yep,
with that old school
yeah,
short
because
spot.
they sent
It's
their
a cool park.
Intamin launch to Lost Island in Iowa.
Iowa, baby.
Craziest purchase ever. But yeah, oh, I love Leesburg. Man, that park is awesome. All right, I
And
think it's time for another quick break. We've been going about 20 minutes here, so we're gonna take a quick break, and we'll come back. We'll talk some more about Joe's favorite trips and how awesome my friendship is for him to have. So dive into that more. And welcome back to Coasting with Giants. Again, I am Thad, the theme park giant, and this is my friend Joe. We're talking about the coaster nerd hobby and everything that goes into it. Uh, we're gonna kind of wrap up here with just a little more talk about some of your favorite trips and maybe some trips you've got planned for this summer if you have any, or just things you're excited about.
So probably one of my favorite trips that we've done, and we talked about like the TBR trips, the tours. That was how gotten to be able to like build up like the roller coaster count
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. Like that road to Cedar Point trip was bucket list for me because it was just all these parks I've never been, always wanted to go to. I got like 70 credits basically just
Right,
on one trip. We're talking like 70 credits in a week long,
right,
probably 10 days. What, it was still like a big decent size, but like basically like how those trips were like we couldn't, you could have gotten like planned a road trip, but like that was the way, like we were on a big bus. So
right.
being able to like go, bounce park to park and like long day, like don't
Well,
have to drive.
it's
It's
tough in
great. You can just,
America too because our parks are open a lot later than most parks in other countries. When you go to Europe, they close at 5 or 6 o'clock, even in like the peak,
yeah.
like summer. So the nice thing with that is you don't get run into the ground as much when you're doing it. And
Hmm.
like so like I did a trip with some friends where we just six of us rented a van and we drove all over Europe. Um, and it was awesome because you have you go to the park, you might drive a couple hours afterwards to get to your next destination, but you're not doing it at midnight, and you've been out at a park 15 hours. But then the problem too is when you're enthusiasts like us and you want to do everything and you only have one day at a park, you only have like 7 8 hours to get everything done, and some of those parks have a lot going on, so that's
Yeah.
where it gets tough with the European parks where yeah, the American parks, it's tough to do like a driving thing. Like I did one on my own, not this past summer, but the one before, and I hadn't done a solo driving trip in a while, and like I'm older than I used to
Oh,
be, and it was like,
it's
oh,
tough.
I'm never doing that again. Like you
Even
and
like
I have
we
done
took our
trips,
little,
that's a lot better having two people because at least you can take turns driving or whatever. But I mean, you run yourself into the ground on American trips because the parks are open
yeah,
like 10 a.m. to 10 at night, pretty much minimum at most places. It seems like in like July. So yeah, that's one
it is
big difference. So doing the
the
bus
good thing
tours
of
is awesome.
Yeah, it is the good thing too about like if you do like doing trips on your own now kind of thing or like with some buddies like being spoiled with the Q bots or the fast
Yeah,
lanes. Like it's people kind of talk about like, oh, well, that's not really fair. It's like, well, I paid the money for it, so
right,
I don't really care. Like I can get this part done
right.
in 6 hours, and I have
Well,
to hit the road
and
and drive another 4 to get up
and
to
we
Hershey or something.
we never really got like any crazy special perks during park hours, that
Yeah,
an average guest couldn't get. Like you can buy a Qbot, the top level, like anybody can do that. So like that was the thing. There was nothing we were doing that like took away from an average day guess, experience, which I always like too. That because I never like when a group comes in and like gets on a ride and you're standing there and it's like, wait, what just happened? They're like
yeah,
Disney, you'll see like the VIP tours like just kind of show up and get in line and you're like, oh, okay. And it is pretty cool when you're on one of those, but like, um, but yeah, so that's a nice thing because it's like, yeah, we paid the money for it. We get extra perks when the parks aren't open, but we also paid for those. The ERT wasn't free, so but yeah, but man, it was always well worth the money. The problem is you get so used to that. Now, if I go to Cedar Point, I'm usually going 2 days to Cedar Point because it's just such a big park. But one day I'm paying for the Fast Lane Plus, which runs
yeah. It's not cheap. It is.
$180 to like 300
Yeah,
depending on the day.
like,
Now it's worth every penny, I think.
oh yeah,
But because I don't want to wait 2.5 hours for Maverick on a busy day in the
no
summer,
way.
and you will wait 2.5 hours for Maverick at Cedar Point, and they're efficient
Yeah.
too. Like those lines, they move fast, and it's still that busy. So yeah, you get really spoiled, and it's an expensive hobby, no doubt, if you want to stay in it. But
That's like the good thing too. Like you go to Cedar Point, you get that. You get to just ride all day. Go to like just feel like you don't have to like you can plan your way around and oh well I'm gonna go to this ride first because it's gonna be less. The line's
hmm
gonna be shorter than that line.
yep,
Even like those days, like those big parks like that in Magic Mountain, you get the fast pass. It's like the best day ever.
right,
Just riding. It's exhausting
it
because you're
is
gonna do from like open to close and it's a 10 hours, but
right.
like
Well,
I don't know.
the last time I
It's
did
just kind
Magic
of
Mountain was 2013 for West Coast Bash, a thing Theme Park Review puts on, and the funniest part, we had the park like that morning for like 2 hours because it's such a big event and they open up like 5 or 6 rides and then you have like nighttime ERT. I think I spent like 3 hours in the park during the normal park operation. Like I was actually watching
yeah.
like Iowa played football that day, I remember, and a bunch of us just went to a sports bar and like watched and drank beer because it's like, well, why would we be at Magic Mountain on a Saturday when it's packed when we know we can go ride tonight? When there's no lines, it's just for the group. So yeah, we're really spoiled with some of that stuff. But oh well.
uh
All right, let's talk about things you're excited about coming up. I know you got one big trip coming up this year, so let's hear all
oh
about that.
yeah. In June I got so it's kind of been like a bucket list trip for me. Like uh I've never done the Texas parks. That's
Mhm.
like of what I have I'd say left of like the big parks in the US.
Mhm.
Texas, so Six Flags Over Texas, Fiesta Texas. I mean SeaWorld, all the
SeaWorld,
like
San
Galveston.
Antonio. You got the
Yeah,
Houston, the
Galveston.
boardwalk. Yep,
So those
Galveston.
I'm planning like do a June Texas trip, Texas roller coasters, and then add some like being a food guy, chef, like barbecue spots,
Oh yeah,
barbecue restaurants in there.
uh,
So like
the
I'm
barbecue's so
excited
good
to
there.
see.
Mm.
And then apparently like and then I guess Cottaland if they get it going in Austin, that like maybe we'll get to be
Is
able to
that
ride the
still like
they're building they're building
the
the
tilt?
tilt coaster, the
Yeah,
Vekoma tilt coaster. So we'll see if that hopefully but that's a big trip that I'm looking forward to, and that's of like roller coaster wise. That's
I
what
feel
I
like I
still.
would do Cedar Point's Tilt Coaster before I did Coda's, but, or whatever that park's called.
Yeah,
I don't know how much I trust this park that popped up, but we'll see. No, I would ride it, obviously. What so of those parks, which rides are you most excited about that, you've read about for
probably. I
years?
mean, obviously, like the two RMCs, like Texas Giant and
Hmm.
then Rattler, because it's like those are rides that I haven't. It's been 10 years now since they've been open, basically,
Right.
and then I've still have not gotten to ride, so I'm excited about
It's
those.
15 for New Texas. That's crazy.
Really,
Yeah, it was like 2010.
that yeah, that's I mean
Iron
that
Rattler
that
was
makes sense.
2013 because I went on the trip and didn't get to ride it the year it opened.
And then
But
Outlaw Run is in that like same, and I remember we basically rode that like my buddy
yeah,
was still living in Springfield,
Outlaw Run
and
and
that was
Iron
like
Rattler were both 2013 because I did that trip and the woman
yeah,
died on New Texas Giant. So I didn't get to do New
oh
Texas
yeah,
Giant or
yikes.
Iron Rattler on that trip, but they did open Outlaw Run the day we got there. They got approval to because that had the different restraints. They didn't have the Gerstlauer restraints, so that one got approved faster to reopen. But just dropped my keyboard, so that's cool. But yeah, so yeah, New Texas Giant is in Dallas at Six Flags Over Georgia. We were talking about that one earlier with the RMC stuff. That was their first one, and then Iron Rattler was one of their kind of next iterations where it's funny. I'm really curious to hear your opinion on those two rides because they're two of the earliest RMCs,
Yeah,
and having done some of the newer generation ones like Steel Vengeance and things like that, they are not as intense. And it's
yeah, I
kind of
can see that.
weird because you're expecting RMC and like it's kind of there and you can see where like everyone went crazy when they first came out, but then you're kind of like, oh, because like I would probably put Texas Giant as my least favorite RMC. Now I love Rattler. Iron Rattler is really cool, but that's more the setting because it's actually
Yeah,
built
Texas Giant was like we're just like testing the waters a bit. Like let's
right.
see.
Yeah, where
It's
like
like
Iron
I
Rattler,
feel
they
like
built
Steel.
into a quarry and it actually like drops off the quarry wall and all this stuff. They do some really cool
I
stuff with
think
it.
I think what I'm most like Fiesta Texas is what I'm looking forward to the most because it's also like Six Flags isn't we Six Flags is whatever, but like I feel like of all the parks other than
It's
Magic
kind of the
Mountain, that's the
Walmart
one.
of like chains.
Oh
Like
yeah, that
honestly,
one's getting Fiesta Texas is getting like the most love every year now it seems, and it's like apparently the guy that's
yeah,
the president or the GM of there,
yep.
like
It's
he's doing everything there is going for like a Six Flags park is what
the
should be
the fact that I
for like
know a general manager's name of a Six Flags, like I can't tell you any park exec, like, but Jeff
oh
Seibert,
I don't
like I know that name because that guy runs that park. Like that to me, that's their crown jewel. Like I know like Magic
yeah
Mountain, Great Adventure, and like Six Flags Great America and Chicago are probably their top three parks if you talked within like the Six Flags Corporation. Those are the three that always seem to get something every couple
yeah.
years, and it's usually pretty major. Where like your park, you haven't had a major roller coaster since
I'm still waiting for
like the
since
Beast or the
1907.
Boss, excuse me. Like I
Well, the
mean,
Boss 2000, but we're still waiting for the major steel roller
right,
coaster that. Well, talking of Texas, I'll be able to finish off the other Mr. Freeze,
right, yep, and
so that's exciting. But
it's
that's like
it
the last major roller coaster that
right.
has been built, steel roller coaster that's been built at Six Flags St. Louis.
It's crazy. Like some of the parks that just get no love, and it's like I've never
And think
understood the
about it.
thought process to not put something into a park, especially like St. Louis, the big city. There's a decent amount of people within a region. Like that would
Well,
come if you
and
had some ride, that like people drive to Holiday World like by
yeah, and
you,
that's
and
the great
that's
thing with like
literally in the middle of
Holiday World.
nowhere. Like,
Holiday World's 3 hour drive from St. Louis. It's
yeah,
easy, just down
yep.
like one interstate. That's
And
it.
and why do you go there? Because they decided to build an awesome wooden roller coaster in the '90s, and it just happened to be the best one on the planet for a few years.
Yeah, and
And then
then
they just kept
having like
putting rides
the
in the every like 3 years since then. Like,
having like the best water park
yeah,
in,
it's crazy. It's just,
and
and
like
like that
even
that's
with
the thing
$2.
when like Lost Island opened in Waterloo, Iowa, because I used to live in Iowa, so like that was a big deal that we got a theme park opened in Iowa 2 3 years ago, and people are like, well, that's crazy. And I like try to explain to people, I'm like, oh, no, 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 I like what they're doing. They've got an awesome water park, like it's one of the top 5 probably ranked yearly. Like Lost Island's water park is awesome, and then put some rides in, and like the park is really nice too. It's really
Yeah,
nice. Like they didn't they created characters, a story, an entire lore around this park, and it's not like an IP they bought. They created all their own stuff and themed it, and it's fantastic. And like no one's going. It's so sad, but they're getting an RMC this year. So like,
oh,
yeah, they're
I
getting a
don't
T
think I knew
Rex.
that.
Yeah, yeah, they're getting not a T Rex, but like the Wonder Woman.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, they're getting
the
one of
single
those,
rail.
the single rail. So it's like
I think that's
that's
also what
pretty
we talk
awesome.
about too. The like Six Flags, just like now, like, and of the Six Flags St. Louis, it was one of the original Six Flags in like in the '70s,
Right.
and like
Just kind of brush to the
Scream
side. Like,
Screaming Eagle, like that was like the number one biggest tallest wooden roller coaster. We're talking like back in the day, but
yeah,
like,
that was
and
the
then they
world
had
record
like
holder when it opened.
the thing with it had the different lands, and it was actually like kind of themed. Like there's
Yeah.
still some of that, but now it's like,
Yeah,
oh hey,
I
what
went
what
we went one
DC
year.
character?
Right. We went one year as a kid, when I was a kid, and like it was themed. And like
Yeah,
you had, because it was different countries, right? And
yeah,
then they had like the Chicago area too. I remember like old
Chicago,
Chicago.
and then like the 1904 World, they do the
That's
St.
right.
Louis
Yep.
World's Fair theme.
But yeah,
That's like
like
where all like the
it was actually like a theme park the first time I went
yeah.
there, and like Great America used to be like that. When you go to Texas, you'll see like Six Flags Over Texas has tried to keep some of that old, because they're the
hmm
original Six Flags, but like, yeah, it's just that park was kind of
Even
run down the last time I was there. Where like
yeah,
Fiesta, they're still doing the theming. Like they just put a whole new land in a couple years ago, that whole like steampunk area for their new floor list. So, and like what everyone know, it's funny because everyone just thinks of Six Flags as a chain, that they make these terrible decisions and whatever. But what I've come to learn the last few years is Jeff Cyber at Fiesta, he doesn't have special, like, an exemption to do what he wants. Every park president or whatever their title is, when they're given their budget each year, they're basically, they get to do what they want with it. And so
yeah,
to hear that is so annoying to me now, like, because we've always just said, oh, it's Six Flags corporate or whatever. No, it's each park doing this to like the
yeah,
last when we went to Chicago a couple years ago. Like I was like, that's a park I grew up with. We went every year for, I don't know, 10 years probably before I went to college. But like to see how run down some of that park was really sad, because I always thought Great America, even 10, 15 years ago, was one of their, like, I'd tell people like,
the
you'll go there,
yeah,
it's amazing, the theming's great, they keep it clean, the rides are awesome. And like I didn't our day there a couple years ago, I kind of walked out of there because I hadn't been there in 10 years, and I was like, oh man, it was kind of like, I hate when coaster nerds kind of harp on some of that stuff, but then like you go and you're like, this was kind of, it's not as
Uh-huh.
good as it
I
used to
mean,
be,
it's
you
like
know. And like you,
the
when you've gone for 40 years, you see that stuff. So, but
well, it's like where like still parks are still like you can still do that like theming ish.
right.
Like I went to Worlds of Fun, and that's the first time I've been to Worlds of Fun in like 10 years. And last summer, and they still have the like they just built the new Zambezi Zinger again,
Hmm.
the GCI. But that whole area is like the African theming.
Yeah,
Like they still have like they're still like
and it's been
kind of
that
keeping
way
with it. It's
for
like
the original
it's
Zambezi
like the
Zinger was
worlds
in
of fun.
Africa. Yeah, it's
Yeah, the
yeah.
different worlds, they still kind of got that little like I mean,
Well,
Worlds of Fun's not the best, but it still
Cedar Fair
has like
still
that little
tries. You know, they're not.
exactly.
You're not going to get Disney quality. You're not even going to get Bush or SeaWorld like
Yeah.
quality theming probably. But I think one of the really cool things Cedar Fair has done. So Cedar Fair is a chain, but they own like Cedar Point, Kings Island, some really big U.S. parks. Well, now they own Six Flags as
Now six
well.
to see what happens with
Yeah.
that.
So they merged with Six Flags over the off season. So everyone's kind of curious. Well, will Six Flags come up, or is Cedar Fair gonna come to their
Yeah.
level?
Or
So we're all a
what's
little
gonna
worried, you
close.
know. Right? Yeah, because Great Adventures had some interesting decisions the last couple months. But so like Cedar
Mhm.
Fair, like they've they still build these crazy roller coasters, but they try to build family rides. You know, they have the deal with the Peanuts characters. You know, you always have like a Peanuts land. And it's usually pretty well done. Um, and then like what I really love at some of the bigger Cedar Fair parks the last decade plus, when they put a major roller coaster in, they build like an entire ride plaza area, and they'll have like the big sign, like Leviathan was the first one, I think. Like, you know, they gave it like its own
Oh
area.
yeah.
Or like
The gatekeeper, like
Gatekeeper at Cedar
yeah, those
Point is
are
one I always
they've
think of.
redone like
Right.
the like just even like the opening plaza
Yep.
like entrances.
But it's not like some over the top, like they're not putting animatronics in and stuff like that, but like it looks really nice. And it's
Yeah.
like it's not it's wide open space, you know, it's not just crowds jammed in there. Like they've just been really smart about some of that stuff where those little things add on to your experience. I know it's just a sign, but like yeah, like I think of like Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, where this park has for years built these really well themed attractions, and even the queues are themed and the lands are themed. And then they build Pantheon
Oh
during the
yeah.
pandemic,
I remember you talking
and they
about this.
literally just like
It's
put
just
it
in a
in like the
field.
sheep pasture, like where the actual sheep are, like because they kind of have a zoo feature at Busch Gardens, but like, and they put up like basically like cardboard signs like
Yeah, it's
for
very Six
Roman
Flags. Like they put up
theming.
like
It was
it's
the
like a tent.
laziest, yes. And like that was so disappointing to see that, because like Bush has always been so much better about that stuff. And at least with their last coaster they did, the bobsled or the snowmobile used to be inside. It's the old
Dark Castle.
yeah, Curse of Dark Castle, like the Spider-Man at Islands of Adventure, if you've ever been on that. It was similar to that. Like crazy they had that ride if you think about it. Like, and that thing was really well themed, but they put a ride in that building, but like the theming's pretty good. Like, so it much better, but that was already there too. So I'm just curious, like with their next ride, what are they gonna do? But I don't know. Like, you know, Six Flags always gets crap because they'll just literally build a roller coaster in a parking lot. Like Scream at Magic Mountain in LA is the one I always think of, where you
Oh,
literally
yeah, it's
see
still
the
a parking
parking
lot.
spots still painted on the ground under the
Bring
ride.
back
And
the
it's like you couldn't
Batman.
put
Bring
grass
back the
in.
Batman theming.
You couldn't put grass in, like just some like
Yeah.
I don't know. So that was way too long to talk about stuff like that, but No, I'm really excited for you to check out Texas because, like, I mean, the history of Six Flags Over Georgia, they do have a couple really good rides. But yeah, I'm just curious too, like the last couple years, because I haven't been there, I think in 3 years now. So if it's improved or not, but I know you're gonna love Fiesta. Like Fiesta is fantastic, and I think SeaWorld in San Antonio is a really nice park.
Oh yeah,
And they have
there's a
some really good
GCI that
rides.
got built. I'm excited
Yeah.
for that, and I love
Well,
those wooden woodies.
Great White is a Batman clone. I think it's like 2 feet shorter or something. Like
Steel
there's some
eel. I
Steel
will
Eel
be
is
able to.
awesome.
I'll have all of the Morgans except for Steel Dragon 2000.
Oh, well, and Steel Eel's not a hyper. It's only like 180. But I
Oh well, I mean, I still like those.
I
They got
love Steel.
those
Oh,
big
I
bucket
love the
trays.
Morgans, and Steel Eel's got some crazy airtime on it. And then, like you said, the Texas Stingray, the new GCI Woody. I was there with the
Looks
Goodwins the
amazing.
year
Looks
after that
awesome.
opened, and it's probably my second favorite GCI behind
Ooh,
like Mystic Timbers. I don't think people talk about Texas Stingray enough. I just don't think enough people have been on it, honestly, because
yeah.
it's a bigger GCI too. Like it's like Thunderhead size, but that thing, we were all blown away by it. Because like I remember even like getting to the park that day, I'm like, oh yeah, they have a GCI. Like you just never heard. Well, plus it was during the pandemic, but like we I probably and there was no line. We probably rode it 8 9 times, and it was I really like Texas Stingray. That's a great ride.
I'm
So
gonna
yeah,
have to
I'm excited for you
watch
to.
some YouTube.
Yeah, it's a really good ride. But I think SeaWorld San Antonio is kind of a sleeper park there, and I've never been there when it's busy. I mean, I think I've only been there. I guess I've only been there twice, but like it's a cool park, and like it's and it's such a different SeaWorld than like the one here. Like you'll
Yeah.
like they still have the same shows, but it's like a different feeling. I don't know how to describe it. Like Orlando has that tropical feel, and like San Antonio, it's cool, but like it's different. But I really like SeaWorld there. So awesome. Well, all right. We've been talking way too long. Joe's got to get to work here eventually. So I think that's probably going to do it for us. So I
I think we
appreciate you
nailed
coming
it.
on, Joe. Yeah, we nailed it doing it the second time. I hope it's
Yeah,
better.
both times.
And I'm going to
Oh, it's
try
all
to
right.
not delete these files this time and actually edit it and upload it. So, um, yeah, first episode, feeling things out, but I think it was a good conversation. I'm glad you came back for a second time. Sorry I made you waste more of your life, but
That was
awesome.
fun.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
All right, man. Well, I'm sure I'll have you on again in the future. Um, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm not sure if this is going to be a weekly or bi-weekly show right now. We'll kind of have to feel out the cadence of things, how often I can get my friends to come on, but just keep your eyes peeled. Make sure you subscribe to Theme Park Giant. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Get out there, make it a giant day of fun. Thanks for tuning in to Coasting with Giants with Thad the Theme Park Giant. For more coaster and theme park content, make sure you're following me at Theme Park Giant on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram.